there, I'm Dr. Jennifer Wisdom, and I'll be talking with you today about millennials. In this presentation, millennials are taking over. This is all about working with a new generation. So whether you're a millennial, a Gen Z, a Gen Xer like me, or a baby boomer, I have some good information for you about how to help your workplaces be even more effective. I'm a psychologist. I am working with a lot of millennials, and I've written several books about millennials and how millennials can help be more effective in the workplace and can reach their goals. And I think this is so important because millennials are the folks who are right now 20 to 40, and they are right at the place where they're becoming the leaders in our new organizations. And so really thrilled to be working with this topic and to be talking with you today. The first thing I want to go over is generation. So just in case there's anyone who missed the train on millennials and who the millennials are and who the other generations are. So we currently have 4 generations in the workforce: baby boomers, Generation X, millennials, and Generation Z. And I'll explain what those are. So baby boomers were born between 1946 and 1964. These are folks who saw the moon landing, who saw Vietnam, who were very aware of civil rights and women's rights, and they're known for being experimental and innovators and hardworking. And their big innovation of their generation was the personal computer. This will come into play later. Generation X, which is my generation, we were born from between 1965 and 1979. We had the coming of age experiences of the fall of the Berlin Wall and the Gulf War at the beginning of endless wars from the US. And we are seen as being independent and free agents, the generation of internet and MTV and HIV. Our big innovation was mobile phones. For millennials are born between 1980 and about 2000. This is generation that came of age with 9/11. They also had a lot of community service and social awareness going on with them, and they're known for their emphasis on immediacy and their confidence, earned or not, focus on diversity and social everything. Their big innovation was Google and Facebook during their generation. And then finally, the youngest generation is Generation Z. These are folks who were born at the millennium, so 2000 and after, and they're seen as being optimistic with very high expectations. These are pretty young folks. They're the oldest ones are about 20. So we're still figuring out what's going on with this generation. But for right now, we can see it looks like their innovation is Instagram, Snapchat, and TikTok. So as we're looking at this spread of generations, the kinds of experiences they had are quite different. The kinds of innovations they had during their lifetimes were quite different. And as I'm sure you can understand, that means that we also may have different value systems that influence how we work in our workplaces and what we value. So let's go through the groups again. So baby boomers, these are people that tend to expect some degree of deference to their opinions because they're older, because they're senior, because they're who they are. And so you can see how that might be setting us up for some challenges in the workplace. They also have tended to be workaholics, in part because they have had the experience that more work equals more benefit, which is not the case for the younger generation. I'll come to generations, and I'll come to that in a moment. They also tend to expect many aspects of work to be understood without discussing. So that can be a challenge as well when people were not actually, younger generations were not actually taught things. They have no idea how things work. And so that can set up some friction there. And they tend to have really high job loyalty. And again, this was in a time when employees were loyal to their employer and employers were loyal to their employees, which again is not quite the case as much for the younger generations. Generation X, my generation, we tend to be more comfortable with authority. We tend to work as hard as we need to work as long as we know why, which already created some friction with the baby boomers, and it'll create more friction on down the line. And Generation X started, as we saw our parents struggle with being at work all the time and being workaholics, we started with the importance of work-life balance. Millennials took all of this to another level. So their perspective is generally that respect must be earned. You don't get respect just because you're older than me or you have more experience than me, which I'm sure is complete anathema to baby boomers who absolutely expect that they have that respect. Millennials want that respect to be earned. They tend to be pretty technologically savvy, goal-oriented, achievement-oriented, which has led some to think that everybody needs a trophy and that sort of thing, but they do respond to goals and achievements. They tend to be somewhat less savvy about interpersonal conflict, and they need a lot of feedback. They really value their work relationships. So again, you can see how this is setting up some conflict in the workplace between generations. And then finally, Gen Z, our youngest generation, they have little fear of power. They don't care who you are, not afraid. They're digital natives, they multitask, they make decisions quickly, which can be good, but also can mean they miss some things. They also expect diversity. So all of the kinds of machinations that baby boomers and Gen X are going through right now about diversity moving forward, that's an expectation for them. They also want feedback, and they also have a lot of side hustles and student loans, and that's true for both Gen Z and millennials. So that workplace loyalty can come into question because baby boomers could spend their lives with one job and their job would take care of them, their employer would take care of them. For millennials and Gen Z, it's a different situation. They're starting at lower wages, they have huge student loans, they may still be living with their parents because they can't afford to move out, and they start side hustles, which then are interpreted by older generations as being disloyal to their primary employer. So you can see where things are set up here to be quite a bit of friction in there. So there's all kinds of things that have been said about millennials. They have been called needy, that they're a high maintenance workforce. They've been called narcissistic, self-centered, unmotivated, disloyal, disrespectful, and my personal favorite, millennials are causing a disturbance amongst traditional management practices. Oh, that just makes me so happy as a rebel. So these are all kinds of negative things that have been said about millennials. At the same time, millennials have also been referred to as the most productive generation, as very motivated, absolutely technologically savvy, really perceptive, extremely team-oriented, strong work-life balance, hardworking, and they are upbeat, high-achieving, team-playing, and civic-minded. So these are a lot of positive things about millennials. So what a complex set of characteristics for one generation. And that's why I'm so fascinated with millennials and how this works. So I'm going to walk through next a couple of ideas around how millennials tend to respond as leaders in the workforce. And then I'll follow up with some recommendations for how you, regardless of your generation, can help make your workplace even better for all kinds of generations. So first, millennials have different views of authority compared to Gen X and baby boomers, the older generations. They tend to challenge traditional leadership and traditional leadership ideas. They're more focused on making a positive difference in the world than they are on money or legacy or hierarchy, which is quite different from older generations that really were focused more on the money, legacy, or hierarchy and on security. Whereas the millennials, they just want to do something good. Provide some opportunity for how your workplace can work with millennials to help them get what they're looking for. They're also not impressed by authority, whether it's age or experience, and they really want to be leaders that make a difference. So you can model being a leader that makes a difference if you're older than millennials. And if you're a millennial, you want to make a difference. And it would be helpful for you to get support and coaching to figure out how you can be the best leader you can be. For communication, millennials tend to want open, direct, and friendly communication, which is not necessarily the case and not necessarily the environment and the culture at some large corporations or at some other kinds of companies. So working with millennials, if you're not a millennial, on open, direct, and friendly communication can be really helpful. Millennials also work well in team settings, and they're motivated by good communication, by technology, by making a difference. So again, this communication part can be really helpful as you're working with millennials, or if you're a millennial, in moving forward in your career. Millennials have different relational expectations than the older generations do. They want leaders who lead by example, and that are friendly and motivating and encouraging. So we're seeing this friendliness again. Millennials want leaders who are friendly. They want leaders who are open. They want leaders who help them. That's a big difference from how older generations may have functioned, because they don't see leadership as needing to be friendly. They just see it as needing to be solid or clear and that sort of thing. So one way to help communicate, help improve the communication between millennials and older generations is to have more of that open and friendly and encouraging relationship as you're being a leader. Now, I can imagine some of you are probably thinking, if you're Gen X or you're baby boomer, I shouldn't have to change who I am. I shouldn't have to accommodate their desires. They should adjust to us. I think that's a reasonable approach. However, if we're looking at what would be most effective in the workplace, it might be helpful to be a little more accommodating. You don't have to judge them. You don't have to say they're wrong. You have different views. So it may be that modifying your approach a little bit could go a long way in improving the output and the productivity and the satisfaction of your team. Just wanted to throw that out there. Millennials do tend to focus on social aspect of work, such as having friendly coworkers and an interesting work environment. Again, this is something us older generations tend to think, we didn't have that. Like, why is that important to you? But at the same time, it is important to them. So that's an opportunity to help keep millennials in the workforce. Millennials can also struggle with having been a peer and then moving into a leadership role, because they want everyone to be friendly and they want everyone to get along. That's challenging when you're the leader, because sometimes you have to make decisions that are unpopular or that other people don't like. You have to deal directly with conflict. There's those kinds of things. So it's helpful for younger generations, as I think it would have been for us older generations, to get specific coaching and guidance on how to manage that transition and how to be a leader that's open and friendly while also being able to hold the standard and ensure productivity. Motivation. We've talked about how millennials are motivated by purpose, by meaningful work, by belonging, collaboration. They want flexibility. And they don't understand why, if these things are not there. Why can't we have purpose? Why isn't there more meaningful work? Why isn't there more flexibility? These are things that many workplaces can provide. And millennials, like some Gen Xers, like myself, we don't want to do things the way it's always been done. Maybe there are opportunities for us to do things differently or better. And millennials tend to feel they're underemployed and that they're underutilized, that their organization isn't making the most of what they have to offer, which makes sense because this is a group that has more education and is more tech savvy and has a more global mindset than any other generation, including my own, to date. So they do tend to be underemployed. And that's an opportunity for workplaces, if you're a Gen X or baby boomer, to help find a way to make sure that they are getting used to the most of their capacity. That means working with them in a different way. So millennials who are leaders, this is when I mentioned that millennials are taking over just as a matter of course for time. Time is passing, millennials are getting older, Gen Xers, baby boomers, we're all getting older, and millennials are coming into their own as leaders. They want competence, they want determination, they want an inclusive management style, and they really want immediate feedback. This is one of the most common complaints I hear from my clients, where the older generations, Gen X and baby boomers, say, God, they want so much feedback. These younger people want so much feedback. And the millennials say, I'm not getting any feedback. I want more feedback. So that seems like a relatively easy way to help things work a little bit better. They do tend to be highly confident and assertive, millennials do, which can sometimes feel off-putting to the older generations of like, why are you so confident? What do you have to, like, what are you bringing to the table that you're so confident? At the same time, they do have skills that us older generations might not have. And again, there's opportunities. This millennial generation also tends to be highly stressed, which again, I can hear some of the older generations saying, what do they have to be stressed about? Again, this is a group that came of age during 9/11, right when they were graduating college. We hit the recession, and now we have the pandemic before they're 40. Like, this is rough. They have had rough experiences, and they have also been kind of painted with a broad brush about their entire generation being lazy or narcissistic or all those negative things that people say. So there's an opportunity. There's a major opportunity here to help out within the workplace to make sure that millennials feel included and feel valued, and to help address the stress that they're feeling right as they're at the point of their lives when most of us have been buying houses, getting married, having kids, really making a solid foundation for the future. And the rug's been ripped out from under them more than a few times. So there's an opportunity to help them lower their stress levels so that they can be effective leaders. So I have 3 recommendations for you, for all of us, whatever generation you're in. The first is communication. It's extremely important that communication happens across generations without all the snippiness and the snipiness that we hear about in the media. And here's some ways that people can communicate better, regardless of your generation. The first step is recommendations that if you're a baby boomer or Gen X, like me, here's how you can communicate better with millennials and with Gen Z. The first is delete the negative attitude. No negative comments about their generation. Kids these days, or millennials are this, or Gen Z is that. Just take it away. It's not helpful. Don't say it in the workplace. Don't tolerate it in the workplace. Just don't. It's not helpful in the least. There's also a way that we can increase this organizational openness where we explain the why and help them learn. Now, you may need to kind of move a little bit past the confidence part, but help them learn, help them understand why. They're asking why isn't trying to challenge your authority necessarily or accuse you of not knowing what you're doing. They're asking why because they genuinely want to know. And, 2 heads can be better than one. So if you can explain why, they might help find a way to do things even better. Another thing that baby boomers and Generation X can do to communicate with millennials and Gen Z is to clarify expectations and give feedback frequently. So clarifying expectations means what it is you want from them and how long things should take, what it should look like. Here's an example, any of those kinds of things to help them move forward, and give feedback, not just good job or that was awful, but something specific. I really like the way you put this together in a coherent order, and you really made it easy for me to take this information and move forward with it. Or I appreciate how well you worked with the rest of the team. It's really valuable that you get along with everyone and that everyone gets along with you. So specific feedback will go a long way. Whether you feel like giving feedback or not, give the feedback. Engage your millennial and Gen Z team members to help craft the culture. They love this stuff. May not be important to you. It may be something you feel like, I didn't need this. Why are they getting this? Crafting a culture is really important, and that's going to serve everyone as it moves forward. It's important for baby boomers or Gen Xers who are bosses to oversee teamwork to ensure productivity and fairness. Again, there may be a little bit less of an ability to manage that conflict because they do want everyone to get along. So being there and being able to provide coaching and support can really make things helpful when they inevitably run into conflicts that happen whenever anyone's working in a team. And finally, baby boomers and Gen X can provide millennials and Gen Z with an opportunity to pursue their passions within work. Obviously, you can't set all the work aside and have them go do anything. And there are probably opportunities for you to help identify what they're passionate about and find a way to get that out at work, whether that's serving on the diversity committee or doing something creative for a client or moving things forward in a way that you hadn't imagined, but giving them a chance and an opportunity to do something differently. Those are some ways to communicate better if you are a baby boomer or a Gen X, to communicate better with millennials. The second part of this is millennials and Gen Z, you're not off the hook. There are recommendations for communicating with your elders, which I don't like being called an elder, but with baby boomers or Generation X. Number one, delete your negative attitude. I know we heard this before. It's not helpful to okay boomer people. It's not helpful to be intentionally disrespectful because you don't like that someone's older than you or that they don't know something. It's okay. It's okay. Delete the negative attitude. No negative comments about their generation. It's not helpful. So if you're playing along, everybody delete the negative attitude about other generations. Another thing that millennials and Gen Z can do to get along better with baby boomers and Gen X is ask them to teach you something. Ask them to tell you something. They are so eager to share generally their experiences and their knowledge, and you have stuff to learn, whether it feels like it or not. So ask them to teach you something, show you something, help you understand. That goes a long way in both building relationships and in helping you as millennials and Gen Z do better in the workplace. Clarify expectations. So what's really helpful is to repeat back the expectations so you're sure you understand. This can also help identify any places where the expectations aren't clear. So they say, I want you to this. You reply, I want to make sure I understand. You're asking me to this. And they say, oh, wait, I also want that. Perfect. Great. That's a great way for you to make sure that you're all clear on expectations. Another piece of advice for millennials and Gen Z is to pay attention to politics. Gen X and baby boomers, we've been around a while, and I can guarantee we have experiences with politics that you didn't even dream of. And I'm not saying that to be negative or to talk down to you. I'm just saying most young people aren't fully aware of the complexity of workplace politics until they get into them. And Generation X and baby boomer, by virtue of us just having been around, tend to have a better sense of those politics and can help you. Pay attention to those politics. Those relationships and the interactions at work go really far. They can really help you and they can really hinder you. And ask your older colleagues about politics and about situations where things don't seem quite right. We can usually help out on that one. Ask questions when you don't understand. It makes you look worse if you don't ask any questions and it becomes clear that you didn't know what you were doing, because then that reinforces a sense anything negative from the older generation. So ask questions. Have the difficult conversations. If something's not working, have the courage to bring it up, talk about it, walk through it, have the conversations with the folks who are older than you and folks who are your age and younger as well. Just have difficult conversations. Your success in life is proportionate to the number of difficult conversations you're willing to have. So keep moving it forward and keep having those difficult conversations. If you shy away from them, they fester, people get resentful, it doesn't work out well. So just have them. And then finally, don't take it personally. This is probably good for all generations. It's not personal. You were born when you were born, you have had the experiences you've had, and hopefully all of your coworkers and your bosses and people who are junior to you are respectful of whatever you bring to the table. I know you are, and help create an environment where everyone can be respectful of that. And in the meantime, don't take things personally because they're not. Second set of advice is to update your organizational practices to support millennial leaders. And again, there might be some pushback from the Gen X and the baby boomers. Why do we have to change everything? They should just change for us. Okay, and here's a better idea. Turnover is crazy. Millennials do not feel the same kind of loyalty to their organizations because the organizations don't demonstrate the same loyalty to them. It's rational if you look at it from their perspective. And turnover of younger generations is causing an enormous amount of stress and strain and financial repercussions for companies. So those are a few incentives to perhaps update your organizational practices to support millennials as they're moving into leadership positions. So if you, instead of accepting that turnover is inevitable, shift the organizational culture to use the millennial talent more effectively. And then just as a bonus, this increases their job loyalty and they're happier. So addressing employee needs by doing things like offering growth opportunities rather than saying people have to pay their dues. Of course, there's some manner of putting in the work and paying the dues and that sort of thing. But when you do what you can to provide growth opportunities for younger people, including opportunities to lead, to be responsible, to mess up, to learn from it. That can be enormously helpful and much more positive than saying, who do you think you are? You have to pay your dues. People said that to me. I didn't like it either. You can also address diversity and inclusion. Incredibly important. A lot of companies are managing this much better now. Invite the millennials in your groups to have input on what happens with diversity and inclusion. And remember that their perspectives are quite different from many of us who are Gen X and baby boomers. Focus on sustainability. I have heard from more millennials than I can count that they were interested in this job at this big company, but they looked at their culture for sustainability and for the environment, and they worked in fossil fuels or whatever, and they decided not to work for the company because they didn't view their values as being consistent with the individual's values. And this is something many baby boomers and Gen Xers didn't occur to us. These folks are looking at it. The young people today, which are quickly becoming the majority in the workforce, are looking at sustainability. So it's important for companies to address that. Make sure the organization provides a path up. Make sure that pipeline is being actively cultured by providing mentorship on leadership practices and helping people move up and helping address through counseling or consulting, helping address any challenges that they find along the way. And they will, because everybody has challenges, but really making that an intentional practice to help them move up. And then finally, promoting relational and emotional literacy. So really valuing the relational aspects of the job, the emotional intelligence of the job, that can really help as well develop better millennial leaders. And then finally, support millennials in developing leadership styles by respecting their contributions, modeling sound leadership that balances the caring and the friendliness with authority, by being imaginative and inclusive and valuing diversity in all its forms, whether you experienced it when you were their age or not. Valuing diversity will go a long way for everyone. Providing structure within an informal atmosphere. This has been a challenge for folks to balance, especially with working from home, pandemic situations, but being able to provide enough structure while still keeping it informal can be really helpful. Applying media and technology whenever helpful, that gives millennials a chance to shine. Emphasizing the teamwork and collaboration can be really helpful, and giving them opportunities for connections and networking and teaching people how to network. A lot of times younger generations, including me, when I was under 40, did not know how to network, didn't understand the value of it. Not sure I still do, but it's helpful to share that with individuals to help them build those networks proactively. That'll be helpful as they move into the higher leadership positions. And then finally, of course, as already mentioned, give that feedback. Make sure you're giving extensive, detailed feedback. We've talked about the different generations in the workforce: baby boomers, Gen X, millennials, and Gen Z. We've talked about how millennials are taking over. We've got 20-year wide generation that are now in their 20s to almost 40, and they are becoming the new leaders. They are taking over in leadership. As baby boomers, as Gen Xers, there's a lot we can do in our organizations to help them be more successful. And if you're a millennial or a Gen Z, we got you, we can help you. And there's a lot you can do to help yourself stay more successful and be able to grow and achieve those dreams and make a big difference in the world exactly the way you want to. Thanks for listening. I'm Dr. Jennifer Wisdom. It's been a pleasure.